the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everybody to the regular board meeting tonight. Let the roll reflect that all governing board members are present. Ms. Sexton Ruiz is not present. We have Dr. Lewis, members of cabinet, and Ms. Juarez is here. I'd like to take a moment to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting and remind the audience of the request to address the board cards that must be completed and submitted to the board secretary if they wish to speak to an agenda item. Board policy provides for 2 cards, white cards to be submitted in order to speak to an agenda item, and blue cards to be submitted in order to speak during public comments. Policy also states there's a 5-minute maximum time limit per speaker. Due to open meeting law, board members are not allowed to address items that are not on the agenda. If you do not want to address the board but wish to give your comments in writing, you can do so on a goldenrod sheet and all members will receive a copy. And that will bring us to agenda item 2A, approval of agenda.
Move the governing board approve the agenda as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, and that will take us to public comments, of which we have 1, and that's Ms. Meg Hartog.
Good evening. My name is Meg Hartog, and I'm the Title I facilitator at Monte Vista. But tonight, I'm here as a spokesperson for KT's Kids. We had our walk on Sunday, and I just wanted to give you a brief update. First of all, I wanted to thank all the friends and family of the Creighton School District for attending the event. And a thank you to Donna, who actually represented you all so well there at the run on Sunday. A special extended thanks for Kurt Collins, who is a member of the Transportation Department and who DJ'd the event, and also Mike Contreras, who volunteered to come to BPA and open up the facility and help us set up and tear down afterwards. Both of those gentlemen have volunteered both years now. We're extremely fortunate to have generous sponsors in Aetna, University of Phoenix, Charlie's Garage, Wheelsmith, Affordable Street Ride, SoCal Speed Shop, Imagine Injection, Red Devil Restaurant, Keegan's, and the Arizona Dale Corner. So they were all there with sponsors. In the past 2 years, we've raised over, and I just heard we had another donation today of $1,000. So we've raised over $11,000 in scholarship money for the students in the Creighton District in the past 2 years, and that helps pay for high school fees. It also brings us closer to our goal of providing college scholarship opportunities for Creighton students. So thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to awarding 18 students this May with scholarships with KT's Kids Funds. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm curious how fast your mile is.
I walk.
Oh.
I was in the last group also. I was taking my
All right, that takes us to item 4A, the superintendent's report.
Well, good evening, board members, and good evening. What a wonderful turnout. The only real report I have is, isn't it wonderful to see everybody skipping back to work after a wonderful spring break? You guys, your enthusiasm is just overwhelming. And it was really amazing. I remember crawling here on Monday morning thinking, what happened to that wonderful week? But sure enough, we hit the ground running. The kids were doing great. The teachers were doing great. The staff was right back on board. It didn't take us, well, maybe 10 minutes. But I hope everybody had a wonderful, well-deserved spring break.
That will bring us to item 4B, governing board reports. Ms. Young, do you want to start us off?
As you all heard, I was with the run last Sunday. It was fantastic. There was people out there. Some of them ran. I walked. I was with the main group. What I didn't hear thank was also the Monte Vista kids, which was great. They were there cheering us on and doing all types of good things, clapping and stuff like that. I thought it was great. I hope to participate again next year and the year after, minimum, until I at least hit 70. Then I'm not sure. They don't have it for walkers, that have walkers. It was also nice to see Mrs. Heller there with her kids and meet her kids and her husband from the Gateway community. On Monday, it was not a school day for our students, but it was for our staff. I had another reason, but anyway, I went out to Mackin for something totally different, and it was interesting. Not everyone comes to school board meetings, which is great if you want to find out the real dirt and you need somebody who doesn't know you're a school board member. And I was out there with their teacher in service at 8 o'clock, and just so happened a permanent sub came, and she says, "You directed me to the wrong room. Where am I supposed to go?" And they said, "No, go to the library. There's a meeting." And she looked at me and she goes, "Are you the other permanent sub?" I didn't deny, but I didn't affirm. So I followed her in our walk there, and I'm talking about Mackin. And I basically asked her, "What do you like best about Mackin?" And she said, "The principal." So I want to thank Julie Frost for, she had no earthly idea who I was until you blew my cover by introducing me. But yes, it was very nice to hear, because in my belief, if your immediate supervisor or boss, if you like them and think a lot of them and think they got your back, you're going to stay. So thank you. That's it.
I don't have one tonight.
Good evening, colleagues. I just wanted to share a quick report. Last week I had the fortune of traveling to Washington, D.C. for the National Association for Latino Elected Officials. They had a school board governance training. Well, it wasn't a policy conference, but it was a school board governance training at no cost to the taxpayer. And a couple things that I wanted to report. Number one, it was great to meet with Congressman Gallego, who does represent 4/5, no, not quite, 4/9 of our schools. And like he just immediately knew who we were, what we're doing, what's going on with our schools, which was really refreshing. Secondly, just to like interact with some of these other board members across the country. I am very proud of the board that we've created. The ability for us to have, we're a functional board, we can have discussion, we can have debate, and we can still get work done. So I thought that was really something I took away, sometimes lose sight of that. But we have a really functional board. It was also exciting to talk to some board members from Cartwright, who are neighbors to the, I don't know, my direction's west. And they're actually looking to Creighton, like what is Creighton going to do next? They were really excited and proud of us for having took a stand on the desegregation funding, current year funding, and the vouchers bills, which after they saw that we were doing this, they took it to their own board and followed suit. So just wanted to report that Creighton has a great name out there. We're doing great work, and it was really awesome to represent us at this governance training. I don't know if I learned anything new to bring back to this board, but it wasn't, at least it wasn't paid for by taxpayers here. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to just address some concerns that have been brought forward at some recent governing board meetings regarding retention, teacher retention in Creighton School District. I feel incredibly lucky to have the benefit of multiple perspectives as an advocate for public education here in Arizona. Not only do I have the benefit of teaching multiple grade levels across multiple content areas, but I have also acted as a site steward, communications chair, and delegate in the 3 different teachers unions that I belong to. Over the past 4 years, I've been able to add governing board member to my list of roles in education in Arizona. And that role has probably provided me with the deepest understanding of what exactly it takes to run a school district in this crazy state of Arizona, that seems kind of hell-bent on destroying traditional public schools. Some of our state senators and representatives really do seem to want to starve and punish districts like ours. And it's my goal as president of the board to foster an inclusive, collaborative environment so we can approach these budgetary cuts or legislative mandates in a spirit of solidarity. As we look around the room today, we see many familiar faces. Oftentimes, it's the same dozen or so faces, although there's almost like 2 dozen here tonight, so that's pretty cool, that we see here every first and third Tuesday of the month. And there's one thing, and while every person in here has a unique story and plays a specific role in the district, there's one thing that each and every one of us has in common. And that is we believe in public education, and we all know that an excellent free public education is the foundation of any society. We're also passionate about this idea that we sacrifice our first and third Tuesday nights every month. We take our work home with us, whether it's grading, planning, or calling parents. We visit schools. We read to kids to honor Dr. Seuss. We attend band concerts, spelling bees, and promotion ceremonies. We go to the Capitol to appeal to our representatives or to learn how to be better advocates for our students and our profession. We spend our own money while earning little more than peanuts. And some of us even do this work for free. And we do this all in a state like Arizona, where many in our state House and Senate are bought and paid for by the Koch brothers. I don't know about all of you, but I often feel like Sisyphus, knowing full well that this endeavor of being an advocate for my students and myself is an uphill battle, but one that must be fought to combat the further marginalization of my students, their families, and my colleagues in education. Before I was on the board, I would very often feel frustrated at the slow process of change in education. But now, as a board member, I see just how many things need to be in place in order to bring about any kind of meaningful change. Not only do the stakeholders need to be on board within the district, but then we all seem to hold our breath at the beginning of each year, waiting to see what kind of crazy legislation or budget cuts are coming our way. Or waiting for election day to see if our bonds or overrides have passed. I often feel frustrated by the lack of control as we lead our local districts, and I've come to understand that what makes us stronger than all of the legislative variables, and that is our shared passion and vision for excellence. We are all of us here because we have a need to serve, and we all want the same thing: excellent schools that serve as the foundation of our communities and neighborhoods. I know that every person in this room is concerned, very concerned, about the problem of teacher retention facing our state and our nation. And while we may have different approaches to tackle this problem, we must acknowledge our shared concern and commitment to the elimination of this problem. I want you to know that I see each and every person in this room as an ally and an advocate for public education in Arizona. Regardless of any affiliations beyond these four walls, which neighborhood you live in, where your children go to school, I see you all first and foremost as allies in the fight for dignity and equity in our schools and communities. I guess what I ask is that we have these difficult conversations about the myriad problems we face in this fight. We need to remember, though, that we must act as partners in education. I encourage more frank and likely more difficult conversations so that we may also come up with creative solutions that listen to and honor varied perspectives. Our students and families seem to already have so many obstacles in their paths. We need to be the public servants who help to clear away any bureaucratic roadblocks and keep that spirit of solidarity at the forefront of the work that we do. We're all on the same side here, and we all want the same things for our students, schools, and communities. And as like every other district in the state, as well as other states in the nation, we need to try to tackle the problem of teacher recruitment and retention. So, as someone very wise told me, let us not circle the wagons and shoot inward, but take our concerns to the people who are controlling our budgets and tying our hands. Thank you for indulging me. Okay, that will take us to consent agenda.
Move the governing board approve consent agenda items A through K in accordance with policy BEDB-R.
Wait, may I pull something very quickly that I just want to have another really quick conversation about? I just want to talk about,
So we need a motion to pull it.
okay, can I move?
We'll first pull it and then you'll make a motion to approve all the moving section of that one.
Okay, I just want to pull item I.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so could you rephrase your motion so that it makes more sense? I'm sorry.
Move the governing board approve consent agenda items A through K, pulling I in accordance with policy BED-R.
There's a motion.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the approval of request for proposal for teacher recruitment with Teach for America. And the big thing that I want to talk about here, I'm certainly not going to ask anybody to not, try to recruit from wherever we can, because we just talked about how there's a retention problem in the state of Arizona. But we had a meeting in Isaac School District with a bunch of TFA alumni, and I was included in that group. And one of the biggest takeaways, and I think this goes for absolutely every teacher, but I feel like sometimes there's this assumption with TFA teachers that they're only going to stay 2 years. And what we found with some of our TOSAs and people who work in HR, teacher on special assignment. So that was the group there. We had some instructional coaches, TOAs or TOSAs, whatever your district calls them, somebody from HR from the district. All of us were TFA alumni, and we talked about how nobody really, not for me personally, but for many of us, nobody really asked them if they were going to stay. Or the thing that got them to stay was the fact that somebody actually said to them, hey, you know what? You're really pretty good at this job, and I know that you didn't think that education was going to be your career, but would you ever consider a future in education? And so as we bring Teach for America teachers in, and I'm one who stayed beyond the 2-year commitment, I think it's really, really important that we treat them as the professionals, just like we do with our traditional entry teachers, but speak to them about the possibility of a future and a career in education, because the people who I am still friends with in Teach for America and who are still in education are truly amazing educators, So I think that we don't want to waste that resource and make assumptions about whether they're going to stay or not stay, and in fact, really kind of foster the kind of relationship that encourages them to stay in these districts, because we so desperately need people and talented people at that. So that was the only thing that I really, and of course, we want to say that to all of our teachers. If they're good teachers, we want to encourage them to stay, but it's those little things that we sometimes forget that are so important to hear, and especially in a state like Arizona where you don't necessarily feel valued or cared about. So that's it. I just wanted to step on my soapbox for just a minute and encourage all the principals and assistant principals out there to kind of nurture and foster those relationships, as with all the other relationships with teachers. So would anybody like to make another motion or speak to that or anything?
Just to speak to that item, Madam President, it reminds me of one of the first conversations I had as a board member with Dr. Ligo on teacher retention. I know that as a teacher, no one ever asked me. In fact, principal just assumed I was leaving and kind of kicked me out. Not figuratively, but I didn't feel welcome. So I'm encouraged to hear your point of view. One thing I did want to share, and something that I appreciate about Teach for America is in a conversation with superintendent, our teachers, colleges are producing a very small number of teachers who come from, that are people of color, or come from low-income backgrounds. So not that I think Teach for America is better than, or it's a different recruitment pipeline. And I do know that they've had a focus on bringing people of color into classrooms. Last year, more than 50% of the recruits were people of color. More than 50% came from low-income class homes, and they also are working with DACA folks. So I think there's incredible opportunity to help diversify our teaching pool by working with these teachers. But I also think it's important to treat all teachers with respect. Make sure that if we want them here, we let them know that, because I think that's how we're going to build a community and the type of environment that is conducive for learning. I move the governing board approve consent agenda item I in accordance with policy BEDB-R.
I second.
Then moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and that will take us to item 6A under educational services, strategic planning development.
Yes. Madam President, other board members, Dr. Lewis, Secretary. Yes, it is our pleasure to bring back our journey that we've been on with the strategic planning. As we said at the onset of forming a strategic steering committee, that we would be bringing back regular updates for you. And so today we're going to bring back information and the progress that we made on our March 2nd and 3rd full day steering committee meetings. Our hope is to have each of you listen with a critical ear and be able to provide feedback to us. I've asked Hilda if she would please give you each a tablet so that you're welcome to scratch down any information as we're going through the process, ask questions as we're going through each phase of our work that we've been doing. And then what we'll do is we'll collect those pads at the end and we'll take that back to our next full day training so that that feedback can then be integrated into our next round of work. Okay? So here is what we have done so far. You're familiar with a lot of this. The last piece would be the March 2nd and 3rd would be new information for you. But this slide just runs through what processes that we have been going through to get where we are at draft 4. So we had our first full day steering committee meeting on the 4th of February. And that was where we developed our very first draft of the values, mission, vision, and missions. Then we moved to February 11th, and that is where we took that information to the Leadership Council meeting, and they vetted the information, provided some feedback for us, which then allowed us to revise again to create draft 2. We then, after the Leadership Council, put together a survey that we sent out to all staff, classified certified, so that they were able to also provide feedback to us, give us their honest thoughts of what they were reading and seeing. It was really interesting. It was very clear that people took that process very seriously because the feedback that we got was really rich and lengthy. We learned a lot back. Then we came here on Saturday, and we spent our day together in the board study session, and that's where you as a body went through our draft 2 and did a lot of serious thinking and discussions and had us be able to come out with a 3rd draft of our values, vision, and mission. And then our last piece of work that we did was on March 2nd and 3rd, and those were 2 full days with the steering committee. And that's where together we analyzed all of the data that came back from the staff surveys, took a look at the draft 3 that was created here through our governing board study session, and then went through again another revision process with that, and where we're at now with our 4th draft of the values, visions, and mission. And so tonight we're going to walk you through each one of those phases so that you're able to hear the thinking and the discussion that went through each one of those phases, and then we'll close with what our next steps are. So we have
several of our steering committee members here. We're going to start with Mr. Geyer, who is going to be sharing the work that was done on the values, vision, and mission. And then we have Mr. Zook, who is going to share with you the profile, student profile that we developed in our work on the second and the third. And then we have Ms. Apodaca, who is going to share our goals. And then we're going to close with our facilitators, Peter and Sharon are back, and they're going to go through with you with the next steps. Any questions? Okay. I'll have Mr. Geyer come on.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, executive team, and Hilda, and everybody else. This is our fourth draft, and we've taken feedback from survey from all the staff, the feedback from the governing board itself, and from the district leadership council. Spent a lot of time working on the verbiage and paring it down and trying to maintain the essence of what we're trying to convey, and yet create documents that are accessible by a lot of different audiences. So we changed the idea of beliefs, and we changed that, or values, and turned it into beliefs. That's based on feedback from the board, the leadership council, and the staff survey. And we wanted to, like I said, we wanted to pare it down and make the statements shorter and more concise, and yet still maintain all of the intent. So we believe in mindful, curious, and adventurous learning, high expectations that promote academic growth, safe schools that nurture mind, body, and spirit, the strength that comes from the diversity of our community, loving each child as their own. Use the same process for the vision statement. And so when we boiled it down, we ended up with Creighton neighborhood schools inspire adventurous thinkers, collaborative learners, and kind-hearted leaders. I want to address the phrase kind-hearted leaders. We're not 100% sold on that phrase. We know what we want to try to convey. When we looked at the term compassionate, when we were looking at compassionate leaders, if you know this about the Spanish language, the term compassionate doesn't translate well. It's kind of pejorative and not seen so well by it in the Spanish translation. It's seen as a bit insulting. So we were thinking of different ways to phrase that, and kind-hearted leaders is what we came up with. And I also want to talk about creating neighborhood schools. We were thinking about our entire district, and then we were thinking about all of the valuable input from all of our sites, all of our different 10 schools. If you think about the Creighton Early Learning Center, and you think about some of the other sites, there's about 10 schools that make up that big neighborhood, and each school, each kind of microcosm has its own set of input to the entire neighborhood of Creighton. So we wanted to make sure we kind of captured that idea in our vision. Mission statement. We wanted to revise the mission to better align with the vision. So after a lot of thought and deliberation, our mission statement reads, we work together to provide a caring, personal learning experience that teaches each child to think, create, and lead.
As we've created, our beliefs, our mission, and our values, and our mission, values, and vision. Thank you. Excuse me. We wanted to put some sort of a bullseye on exactly what type of students that this district would, create. but would, if they go off to ninth grade and a month into ninth grade, and a ninth grade teacher, how would they identify whether or not the kid came from Creighton, or came from Madison, or came from Cartwright, or came from wherever? What would be the distinctives? What would be some of the attributes that they could clearly identify as being, wow, they're a Creighton kid. They're not one of the other kids from the other districts. They're unique. There's something distinct about them. So we came up with some qualitative thoughts along those areas. First, an adventurous thinker is someone who is curious, creative, and experiences the world with a sense of wonder. Secondly, they are thoughtful and reflective about ideas and relationships. Third, they are adept at problem solving, critical thinking, and making connections. Fourth, they are sharp, ambitious, and intrinsically motivated. Secondly, a collaborative learner would be someone who has good communication skills, who is culturally aware, who has well-being, physical and social and emotional well-being, strong life skills, and habits of mind. Lastly, kind-hearted leader, showing passion, pride, caring, and generosity, focus on reaching goals, confident in self-advocacy, and a commitment to community service. And I just wanted to highlight just a couple of those because there's a whole bunch of them there. One would be being culturally aware. We talked about this whole idea of us being a global community. We're trying to fit where that might fit in the district and the goals of the educational goals of the district. And after a lot of deliberation, I think we have landed on this idea, and it was captured in a short story at LCK, where there's a lot of refugee children, there's a lot of Hispanic children, and there's some Anglo kids. Well, when they get together at recess, they all play soccer. All the refugee kids, all the Spanish kids, or all the Hispanic kids, all the Anglo kids, and they speak Spanish as they're directing each other how to pass and where to pass and all of that. And we saw that as a beautiful picture of every child being culturally aware of their circumstances in the community that they come from. And we want to foster that and allow that to grow. Secondly, this whole idea of being curious, creative, and experience a world with a sense of wonder. This is that whole idea of being a lifelong learner. And we believe that educators who are able to inspire and equip these fertile minds of these children, that they can become curious, that they can become very creative, and they can approach the world with a sense of wonder that will help them throughout their entire life, regardless of their home circumstances, regardless of what they might experience with their friends or anything else. That's something that we as a district, we feel that we can cultivate and really elevate. So we found that to be very, very important. And I think that is it. We also talked about you might have some questions. If that's a ninth grader, we also talked about making some markers for a second grader and for a fifth grader, so that they would all align. So by the time somebody matures through the school district all 9 years, they would hit these certain markers. So by the time they end up in ninth grade, these would be the attributes that people would know that they came from the district. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
So what they spoke, I'm Adriana Padaka. I actually am the teacher represent, and I work at Excelsia in first grade. So that was the big majority of what we did our first day. Our second day, we really focused on our goals and kind of beginning the work of what are the action steps that are really going to bring life to our mission and vision. Kind of keeping in line with the idea of the Creighton profile, we came up with 5 big goals. Adventurous learning, which is really focusing on designing the lessons and the learning and incorporating our special areas into our content area. We also have health and wellness, really focusing on the second portion of our Creighton student, the healthy leading and life skills. So that was ideas talking about health and wellness, possibly providing like the dental labs or a center for all of that kind of information and outreach to our families. We also talked about value. There are so many really wonderful things going on at each of our campuses, and a lot of what we're building in our mission is found within our schools already. So we really wanted to make a goal of highlighting and showing like what's happening in our schools and the great things that are already present and living and breathing in our community. The third goal was stewardship, which is a lot of cross-training, helping maximizing all of our resources, principals working together on their budgets, for instance, and then finally communication. We really wanted to focus on that two-way communication, that we have many things we want to share with our families, but we also have families who can bring a wealth of knowledge and experience into our classrooms. And within that communication, if we're using all of those to their fullest extent, each of our other goals will be enriched through that communication.
So that was our 2 days. They were very intense, and we were just had we really put our heads together. We did lots of conversations. We broke up into small groups. We had carousels going around the room. We were just so highly engaged, and the energy in the room was really, really incredible. So that's taken us through, this is the next draft that we created. So now what are our next steps? And I'm going to ask for Peter and Sharon to come up and share what our next steps are.
Madam President and board members, it's good to see you all again. One of the things that I need to say at the beginning is to echo what Dr. Peterson said. It was really a very engaged group, very professional, very, very committed to the work of the students in the Creighton School District, and that came through loud and clear in everything and from everybody throughout the process. So what I want to do is address now where we're headed from this. I think we do have the draft of the district's values, vision, or beliefs, vision and mission. I think there's a lot of work still to be done in terms of fleshing out the goals that Adriana was talking about. So that's going to be really a focus for our next meeting next week on the 31st. So we'll review whatever feedback we get from you tonight. Finalize those statements that we have right now, and then hopefully for each of those just goals that we talked about, identify who could really take the lead in developing more specifics about that, because that's really where the next step is. We feel like we've got a good handle on the general areas, but we need more specifics there. We also need more feedback from the community in order to do this work very well. And so the meeting on April 14th of the Community Council will be an opportunity to present the work that we've done, the beliefs and the vision and mission and goals to the community, to engage that community so that we get their feedback on that process, on the wording of it, and on anything that's either missing or needs to be emphasized, and really hear as carefully as we can from community members about what needs to be done next. We'll be back to you on April 19th at the meeting, I guess it's 4 weeks from tonight, to present this work that we did on the 31st and the feedback from the Community Council to you to determine if there's any revisions that are necessary beyond what we've done so far. That's where we are, where we've been, and where we're going in the next couple of steps. There's obviously, after these 3 steps that are listed here, there's some further review and instead of winding up the process that's going to continue beyond. So now, if there are any questions about either the process or the product that we've had so far, then we'd be happy to either answer those or direct those to somebody else to help us answer those questions.
Oh, any questions? Any of the board members?
Comments, discussion?
Well, when you were going through, I think it was the first section of values, I was commenting to Dr. Lewis, that, you know, I want my kids to go to school here. You know, that's the kind of school that I want my kids to go to.
Part of it-
That's
part of
the
it.
So I have some comments. I actually spent a lot of time thinking about this, probably too much. But so when I first saw it, I was very confused about the kind-hearted leader. So thank you, Principal Geyer, for that explanation. I did not know that. So that's good to know. It was distracting to me. Like, why aren't we using compassionate, which is a buzzword? It's, you know, it's not my favorite word either, and it was actually a compromise from empathetic. So I don't know how that would translate, but perhaps there is another word, because I think kind-hearted it was just distracting for me.
Thank you. Dr. Peterson?
What that really did for us, though, is it really opened up our eyes as to how we have to really vet this through so that we make sure with all of the different cultures and communities that we have, that we are being really mindful and that we make sure that we throw any other words that could
Right.
possibly be misconstrued.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
And the other comment that we got was that the word empathetic in English is not widely understood.
Right.
That's somewhat,
Right.
kind of a vocabulary SAT type word rather than a commonly used word. So again, we're looking, I think the steering committee is looking for what is going to be the resolution.
Right. And then the other takeaway that I had was, and I understand why you want to have the mission and vision aligned, but they seem too aligned to me. Like the vision doesn't pop out to me as being that much different. And it just doesn't pop out to me as something that says who we are, or says that we are different or unique. I feel like this could be for any school. So I did just write up a couple things that I'm just gonna give you guys as comments, and it feels very presumptuous to have this written down to give to you. But I mean, one thing I thought was, I kind of took the vision and the mission and combined it. And mine is, we provide a caring, personal learning experience that inspires adventurous thinkers, collaborative learners, and I put compassionate leaders back in there, but I'm not, set on anything. And then for a vision that really, I think, if you're talking about a goal for 10 years from now, Creighton neighborhood schools are the schools of choice for our community. I mean, it doesn't give a definition afterwards of who we are or what we're doing, but I feel like we don't have that figured out yet. And maybe that's okay. I mean, I was thinking about it for so much, I almost felt like maybe it's premature for us to have a vision, because I feel like we don't know who we are quite yet. And that's maybe okay. I mean, Dr. Lewis is not here for a whole year yet. So just my 2 cents, and I'll give this to you guys to take away. And thank you very much for all of your time, everybody that's worked on it.
Thank you for going over it so careful. The steering committee will take your comment and consider them very well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have a different point of view, which is we might not know 100% household to household. I think without a vision, I don't think a vision is a goal. I think it's aspirational, and I think we start with where we're at, and it gives us a North Star. I do agree with you, Will, that the vision mission, they sound pretty similar. But first of all, I just wanted to thank everyone for their input in this work. I know it's a long, comprehensive, many people involved process, and for me, this is some of the most important work we can figure out, because this is the substance of what we're going to be doing with our students, with our children. I grew up in El Paso, Texas. It's a border town, and I think growing up, I didn't know I was a little Latino kid because my dad didn't want us to know that. It was prohibited in our household to speak Spanish. The idea of success, at least that my father articulated, was to be white and assimilated. And he still believes in that, and that's fine. But when I saw culturally aware, I hope what that means is that like we are affirming each child for who they are, and that if you're Latino, success isn't necessarily white corporate America. I'm hoping that that's what this means, that we're affirming each child, because I feel like I missed out on a lot because of that. So for me, that's something I'm excited to see that in here. Really did like how this is all coming together. I wonder if we can reconvene the community, what do we call it, the town hall?
Yeah.
Where we kind of like, oh, we're all kind of all over the place, because although we don't have the bigger, broader, comprehensive community that we think we aspire toward, we do have some community, and I think that's where we start. So anyway, my 2 cents are we're on the right track. I really appreciate the progress. I think this is some of the most important work, and I don't think we're too far off. So thank you.
I have one more comment too. The profile of a 9th grader, I mean, that I really recognize as that's unique to us. So I feel like that's spot on. I mean, I love that.
Any other comments?
Mine are written down.
Okay, thank you.
As per the directions.
I want to add that there was an interesting dialogue about the concept of adventure. And we didn't really speak to that in the talk tonight, but it's funny that when it popped, it just resonated with everyone. And then we went out for a little loop out, and we worked with the Leadership Council, and they're like, adventure? What's adventure mean? How will we measure it? Jokingly, sort of. And then it was like, well, if it's an adventure, and we define it, then it wouldn't be an adventure. So we just don't quite, there's real courageous concepts in here that will make us uncomfortable. And I love your intuitive reaction, because I want my kid here. And then you popped it and synthesized it, and then we distinguished maybe what revision could be and where we are. And so I really think we got some great feedback tonight to just kind of go that one step further. And I'm mostly hearing and think I'm getting a nod from the board. Keep going, this is the right direction. Is that what we're hearing? Yeah. Okay. And a lot of courage and a lot of applause to the people who are putting hours and hours and hours into it. And thank you, Amy, for your hard work to synthesize tonight.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Okay, that will take us to item 8A and under personnel, district committees update.
Mr. Mann. So, good evening, Madam President, Governor Board members, and Superintendent Lewis. So we are very pleased to come to you this evening to share with you recommendations from numerous committees and provide you with information from the Paper Performance Committee that was reconvened, the Budget Advisory Committee, and these confirmed recommendations. And in order to do this, to prepare you for future governing board action. So I'd like to invite members of the representative teams who will speak before you this evening, beginning with Ms. Katie Stark.
Good evening, Governing Board President and Governing Board members, Dr. Lewis and Cabinet. As the first slide, and it wasn't very fancy, I'd like to give some background on my participation on last year's PFP committee. Our goal as a committee was to develop a 2-year plan, so employees always begin the school year with an approved plan. And it has occurred in the past that current year's plans were approved mid-year, and employees do not begin the school year with a plan since paper performance is determined on the previous year's data. As I recall last year, when we presented a 2-year plan, the governing board felt approving 1 year was the best way to be respectful to a change in governing board members and to our new district administration. So a 2-year plan was not approved. The recommendation by the current PFP committee to carry out our current year's plan, to carry over our current year's plan, was based on discussions about our new evaluation system. And we wanted to maintain our commitment to include classified staff in receiving PFP money. So the recommended change was to possibly have the payout in August and September timeframe. So those were how the recommendations ended up. So I'm really excited about the prospect of next year's PFP committee to develop a 2-year plan to present to you next spring. So we are always 1 step ahead rather than a half step behind. Thank you.
So this is not a new slide probably for a lot of people in the room because it's been here at this meeting previously. And it's also been one of the guiding pieces of information for several of the committees that have been doing work. Basically, don't want to belabor it too much, but the real big question on the table for budget for next year is obviously Proposition 123, and the other major factor that we see in these budgetary numbers is the same-year funding and the new financial system and how that can have a negative impact on our budget for next year. When you balance all of that out, what we're looking at is without Proposition 123, that middle column, the yellow number at the bottom, is a shortfall of just under $300,000 for next fiscal year. If we do have passage of Proposition 123, there will be 2 financial positives that would affect this picture. One is the addition of budget capacity for the 15-16 school year, the year we are currently in, to the tune of a little over $1.25 million, and the ability to then carry that money forward to the 16-17 school year to be able to utilize those dollars as one-time funds. And then with the ongoing dollars being put into our budget capacity starting in the 16-17 school year, we'd be looking at an increase of just under $1.3 million as opposed to that just shy of $300,000 shortfall. Oh, actually, this one's me too, so I'll budget advisory committee recommendations. And this again has also come here before. We just kind of wanted to bring it back up again as a reminder. The budget advisory committee has continued to work, and as we move forward, one of the things that we'll see new after this is looking at those one-time dollars. But these were recommendations that were brought forth in relation to those ongoing dollars, again with that assumption of Proposition 123 passing. Some of the items on here have already moved forward through the confer process and been brought to the board and acted upon. So like that item number 2, the health insurance cost ratio redesign, board's already taken action on that, and that has moved forward. So I'd like to introduce Dorothy Green to talk a little bit about the last budget advisory committee we had and the work that was done with one-time funds.
So one of the things that we decided to do at the end of our regular budget advisory committee is regroup at least one more time, and we're going to now hopefully continue that even beyond that one time. But a majority of the group decided that they were willing to come back and continue to discuss different options, and especially talking about the one-time fund. Unfortunately, one of the parents who's on our committee was not able to be here tonight, and he really led this charge, so we really want to give credit to him because he really led this in terms of helping us think about how to use that one-time fund without really thinking of it as one-time fund per se, because we really tried to not just think about, okay, what can we buy one time that will, be really useful for our district, but rather look at it more in terms of what can we invest in that will then maybe pay off down the road or will keep regenerating funds within itself. So we really looked at it as more of an investment rather than kind of one time, let's buy this and then that's it. I guess we'll use it till it's all worn out. Rather, we looked at what are some programmatic things that we could possibly do with that money that would be an investment that would then have returns that would come back and even become a funding source as on their own. So he really led that charge, and then we really got into some really rich conversations during that night's meeting. And as you can see from the slide here, there were several different options that we talked about. We really are looking at some things that will attract, as everybody in education knows now, or hopefully has learned, it's not all about money, but money is about students in the seats. So with students comes money, and that's how we build the funding sources. So we tried to look at programs that would attract and retain students within our district, which goes really well along with the whole work on the values and the vision and the mission, because a lot of that work is designed to do the same. So we looked at what are some programs that will really bring people in and keep people within our district. So we looked at, and we didn't get into the details of these because we know that's going to take more work down the road. So these were just some of our options that we looked at. We looked at the gifted program. We talked about things like the preschool. We really looked at how the preschool is helping to bring students in that don't even live within our district, that are now able to be attached right away to our district and hopefully stay within our district because they see that as such a valuable tool and resource and connection to our district. We looked at ways to build that up and continue that going before and after school programs, ways to maybe use this as a tool to help with the retention of teachers. Again, trying to kind of blend lots of our problems into solutions that had lots of different kind of areas that we're trying to work on. So with teacher retention, looking at, well, how can we have on-site, before school, after school, daycare, preschool services that are not only for the community, but also for our teachers and the staff, so that they can also participate in that. Some of that maybe with some cost and sliding fee scales, depending on how that might kind of iron out once the details are worked out. Really talked about marketing and again, the community schools and how to bring programs in that are really going to attract. And then we kind of took a couple slides out, but we really got into a lot of discussion with, talking about how do we connect with the bigger environment in our community in terms of the high schools, and what are some of the programs that they have that our feeder schools can work on that can connect and really just build a situation that's really inclusive for all of our community that want to do different things with their lives. So that's some of the work that we did, and we're hoping to continue to meet down the road and just really get into some of those smaller nitty-gritty details of how to make those programs work.
Can I say something, Dr. Woodall, please? Dorothy?
Yes.
You and your committee, I think with these one-time fund recommendations, I think this is like the 10th year I'm on the board, something like that. Okay, give me a break. But this is the most creative I have seen coming out of the Meet and Confer. And hopefully, I think I would like to see some of these come to fruition somehow, some way. But this is like, y'all did like a 90-degree turn, which is fantastic. It's not the same old stuff. Because sometimes the same old stuff, it's okay to keep us here, but it's not okay to get us there. So I want to thank you and your group there.
Yeah, we really worked hard at that, and we had a lot of creativity going on in the room, and a lot of sometimes heated, but often discourse going back and forth and just ideas popping all over the place, and it was really great. I mean, I think if Jay would say, instead of having to be like, hoping more and more of us would show up, we were telling him, hey, this can't be the last time we meet. We have to meet again. We have to meet again. We have to now separate into smaller groups and then really flesh out all the details. So there's a lot of really positive energy, I think, in the room. I think, as we bring more and more people into those conversations, we can get the right groups together to flesh them out.
Yeah, I really like this.
Yeah, it's a really dynamic, exciting process.
So now we'll go into the Meet and Confer recommendations. The purpose for the multiple committees, the compensation committee information fed into the budget advisory committee recommendations, which were then presented at Meet and Confer, Meet and Confer met and then provided more information to Budget Advisory. I don't know if you remember the bouncy ball. So you'll also see reference to those in the recommendations that are coming up and other committees that are active here in the district. So there are many voices at the table. Right now, I would like to invite the representatives from the Meet and Confer team forward to share with you some of the recommendations. And we'll begin with Mr. Tim Knorr. He's a teacher, I think second-year teacher at Papago School. Second or third? Okay, one for
There you
five.
got it. All right, so a lot of what I'm going to share is information that you guys are already aware of, starting with the first one, which is something that has already been completed, the cost neutral solution to our healthcare, really making sure that we're not increasing any costs to both our staff as well as the district, especially in case 123 doesn't pass. We've run into some issues there. For the issue of compensation, this came from the compensation committee to the table at Meet and Confer. Together, we passed that all employees would receive a minimum increase of 1% for the 2016-17 school year. We also addressed the issue of the frozen pay scale. And so honoring all of those teachers who have been here 4 or more years who would receive kind of on a sliding scale depending on their years of service, 0.5% to 2.5% increase on top of the 1%. Really sending the message that the district is going to honor our years of service and our commitment to the district and sticking with it even through those frozen pay scales. The last thing that came out of compensation was that we really wanted to kind of send a message to push forward in the future years, to always just have on mind increasing that attractability to the district through our base salary. The last one that I'll share is Meet and Confer recommendation on custodial services, recommending that a task force put in place the allocation of a minimum of $50,000. And again, that kind of makes up some monies that were lost in past years. And really, and really just sending that message that the district is on the right track, that we're really looking at all areas. It's not just teachers, so it's custodial services, and as you'll hear from Mr. Geyer, transportation.
And the recommendation to create salary and schedule parity for transportation employees is mainly about retaining these safe and effective drivers that we have. We notice that there's a disparity in pay scale between our drivers and comparable districts. And while our drivers get more hours per week typically than other drivers in other districts, the pay scale is lower. So this recommendation would try to bring parity between the hourly pay for our drivers and all the people that work in transportation. Another recommendation is for additional days for the ed secretaries, office clerks, and assistant principals. If affordable, we would like to increase clerk time by half a person per building. Obviously not half a person, but shared with building. So, I'd probably take a half person at this point. Just to remind you of this clerk and kind of what they're helping out with. You know, when we think about the impact on students, this clerk helps a lot with customer service. They're the first person that people see when they come into a building. They answer the phones for us. They do a lot of filing for us. They do a lot of office work for us. They're the smile that greets the kids and the families when we come into our schools. So they're really important. And we know that our ed secretaries and our office managers have had to take up some of this front office, this front desk duty for a long time, and that's okay. They're kind of on top of that. But this would allow the office managers and the secretaries to spend more time doing some of the other things that they have kind of gotten behind on in the past few years. So we're looking at increasing the office clerk, like I said, the ed secretaries by about 10 days, and assistant principals by 5 to 10 days. And the idea behind those 10 days for ed secretaries and 5 to 10 days for the APs is, again, to help with filing and preparing schedules so families and students can know what their schedule is going to be for the following year, and to get us ready for the upcoming year. So the APs and the ed secretaries go away for the summer, and it's hard to get all the filing done and the files built for the new students and to enroll students and families as they show up at our schools over the summer. Sometimes we have to send them off with just a sign on the door, send them off to the district office to enroll. They may not be able to get to the district office. So this is just improved customer service all around. Very good for our district. We also recommend, outside of contract responsibilities, to utilize the compensation committee to study stipends for work outside of the contract day, considering parity with ancillary and extracurricular salary schedules. So just looking at ways that we pay people who are working outside of their contract day. Can we improve that? Can we enhance that?
Can I ask a quick question? Because I recall as a teacher in Creighton, we would often have failed sub days at work, and I'm sure it probably still happens. I know it's difficult to staff substitute teachers, but one nice thing that my new job provides is if it's your planning period and you're willing to cover a class, we actually get paid for that time. So I don't know if that's something that you already do or if that's something that, and I know that you're looking at it and trying to figure all that stuff out, but even days where you maybe have to split up the class because it changes your whole entire day, makes your job a little bit harder. Just some kind of ideas, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. ELD teachers, we're recommending that we continue the study of attracting and retaining ELD teachers to the Creighton School District by forming a committee to do that. Our ELD teachers have some duties as part of their job that are beyond what a mainstream teacher might have. And so what we find in some of our schools in some instances is that our more highly talented teachers are choosing the mainstream positions when possible, and we're not having our more highly talented teachers, in some cases, not having our more highly talented teachers operating as ELD teachers. So we're looking at ways to make it more palatable for people to choose ELD. We've provided a lot of training and professional development over the years for those teachers, but in the end, most people would agree that the ELD teachers have a little bit more to do than the mainstream teachers, and yet compensation is the same. So we're looking at ways to, we want to study that. We want to form a little committee to study that and see, are there ways that we could make that more attractive to our more talented teachers. Yes. We want to utilize the instructional time task force to look at teacher prep time. And the statement is very specific. We seek to increase prep time to maximize special area schedules, taking into account equitable prep, instructional and transition time for all certified employees, travel time, and maintaining the value of some common planning time. So our recommendation is that we task the instructional time task force with this idea. Efficient.
With a lot of the things that we discussed, a lot of these moved without the passage of Prop 123. And we know that going, which is why we built into the proposal to continue the discussions, especially with the part-time compensation as well as the ELD compensation. Our class sizes, however, were really not. This was something that we came to consensus as a group. While we have a K ratio, a building average of 1 teacher to 26 students, we really wanted to have guidelines that labeled grade level bands, kind of like, here's a range that's appropriate for that grade levels, so that we don't overrun our younger grades with very large classes. And it helps give guidance to where we portion our student numbers. But this one we thought we would work about.
So, before you will come the paper performance plan on April 5th and the placement salary schedules. We plan on bringing both placement schedules to you should 1, 2, 3 pass, and should it not, so that you have those for your review. And then on May 3rd, it's tentatively planned for the maintenance and operation budget, which may be kicked back another week if needed. Are there any questions?
I just wanted to clarify one thing. The teacher prep time, that's really just a recommendation to study that. It's not any money allocated to it yet.
Right, so the Meet and Confer Committee recognizes that the scope of Meet and Confer is wages, salaries, benefits, and conditions of work that are non-instructional in nature. And prep time tends to be also a working condition. So it's one of those things that touches both areas. So the Meet and Confer Committee wanted to be sure that they made a recommendation that we want to make sure that there's adequate prep time for teachers to plan their lessons and work and collaborate together. Yet understanding that you can't really increase prep time without touching instructional time and allocating more funds for more special areas
Right.
or release time. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Thank you so much for your presentation and your hard work.
And the interdependence of the different.
Absolutely, I really, yeah.
We could see the creativity. That was such a great.
All right, so that takes us to item 9A, projected bond costs.
How much?
Those assembled, very pleased to offer Mr. Lewis, our Director of Physical Plant Services, and I to bring to you as part of an ongoing series of informational presentations, some information on pension project options. This is being brought to you not only as part of that presentation, but based on some requests from the governing board to look at what some cost models look like for potential projects if the board was interested in moving forward. On the election. In front of you, you've got a handout, and this is going to look like you received an identical handout to one that was presented to you when Megan Burke from RBC Capital Markets was here to talk a little bit about our bonding capacity and what a bond program would look like. But let me point out there is one page that is actually different, even though it looks very much the same, which is page 5. When she brought the original packet to you, it was not available for our use yet what the actual timetable was for November 2016 elections. And so I was taking the liberty of swapping that out for you to give you the actual timelines and dates that are required should the board choose to move forward with an election on that November 8th election date. So that information is available. And the other reason for having this is obviously as we look at these projects, if you take a look on page, kind of flows from page 3 to page 4, but there's sort of that bond cycle information, and the black band at the bottom that says totals, which is grouped by columns for 2017, 2019, 2021, shows some potential bond sales and what those dollar amounts would look like. And Mr. Sukanik and I thought it would be important for you to have that in front of you as we look at some of the project costs and kind of get your thinking going. Well, if this project costs this and the bond sale equals potentially this amount, where is the alignment here as we start to look at some of these projects? So the information sources for the information that we're about to share with you, obviously RBC Capital Markets have already mentioned, but Orcutt Winslow, you'll see Mr. Sukanik will present some architectural layouts for campuses that were developed for the district for a prior presentation about 2 years ago. And there will also be some updated components there because as we talked about Creighton School, we realized we didn't have anything comparable to that school site. So Mr. Sukanik has actually engaged with them to get matching sets for that campus as well. We also have community council feedback that was received that's integrated into these recommendations. The 20-year facilities plan that was built in 2009, and some of those projects have been completed. We'll talk about that, but obviously there's still, we're not 2029 yet, so that plan A hasn't been completed for that reason, and B, from a lot of the other discussions we've had about budget, we also haven't been rolling in money for building renewal either over the past, decade. So obviously we're not where we would ideally like to be in a 20-year plan. Starting in 2009, although there's been a lot of great work done since 2009 to move us forward. And then the life cycle goal plan that physical plant services uses to figure out, well, when should carpets be replaced or air conditioning units be replaced or other life cycle items, painting, all those different types of things, was also one of the pieces consulted and put together all of this information for you this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sukanik to talk to you about completed public projects.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Madam President, Governing Board, Dr. Lewis, Cabinet. As you see there, we have done a lot of work. Completed bond projects, as it says there. Gateway, the air conditioning units were changed out because they were above their life cycle. Most air conditioning units are 12 to 14 years. These we changed out about 16 and a half years. We were putting more money into them than it was really worth, so it's time to change them out so we get another good 15 years out of it. LCK and DL North, the parking lot was falling apart. We did that. Preschool playground, we had to comply with federal compliance. Had to have certain ground fall, had to have certain spacing, so we just went ahead and put a whole new playground in for those kids, and I watch them as I go by there every day. They love it. Little playground for them. Wrought iron security fences, as you can see in several areas that's been done, about $250,000 of that. One of the big things was office security district-wide. If you've been to all the offices, including the district office here, I feel that we're pretty secure here, about as secure as you can get, but everybody knows if somebody wants to do something, it's there to try to slow them down and stop them. Carpet replacement district-wide, about $150,000, a little bit more than that. 4 large projects. Mackin, we just recently opened that school this summer. We did a 6th classroom, $2 million. Monte Vista, complete new build, $16.5 million. Apico, complete new build, $17.5 million. Great looking schools, bringing in kids. Parents love them. The reason the difference of those schools is Apico's school holds 1,000 children, and then Monte Vista at the time was deemed to have a 900 school for 900 kids instead of 1,000. We were kind of downsizing. Large bond projects, considerations. The 20-year plan showed Creighton School site to be the next new build, but that was, it's a living document, so that can change. They're looking at $20 million, which that's a good approximate cost because when the new bonds go through, not like the old bond, we can use FF&E, we can use that money for students, desks, chairs, and all that kind of stuff. Plus, we can use that money for IT. The old bond, we couldn't do that. We had to struggle to try to get these new schools together, and these two new schools that we built, if you've been through them, we still have some of the old equipment in them, which is kind of sad. Larry C. Kennedy, we have a complete new build, of course, another 20. Loma Linda, 20. All that money there is gauged on what size school we want to build. We want to go bigger, it's going to go up. We're going to go smaller, it's going to go down, of course. We have a Biltmore partial site, which you'll see in the renderings that I'll bring up. There was a gym, music, PE, and band. That's right around 2 million if we were to look at that. Mackin to complete the new construction of the building, which that building that's sitting there is 6 classrooms. It already has a foundation for its second story and pop out on the side, which would be the same size as the 2-story classrooms that you see at Monte Vista and Papago. That's what that was ready to build to finish when we got to it. And then Papago complete, most people don't know, but building C on the east end of the building, you'll see it's a single story. That's ready for a 4-classroom pop-up, what they call it, for 4 more classrooms, second story ready to go if we had to or wanted to. Here's a Creighton school option. This is looking at $9 million, approximate again because of permitting and because of utilities and stuff. We're looking at, because Creighton has 1935 classrooms. They're the oldest classrooms that we have in the district today. Remove all the classrooms, build the 2-story classrooms there, and then we, in option 1, you leave the cafeteria and some of the other buildings, and also the gym would stay there. The gym would be like phase 2. We can revamp the gym. Yeah. Here's what a full build would look like with all the support services still in place. We would keep the gym there because that gym's a newer building and that gym could be renovated at a minimal cost. We wouldn't take that much to really spit that up. And it's comparable to the new gym that we have now because the music, band, PE are all in the same building. That's what we call the noisy building.
Yeah. on these
Yes, sir.
On these renderings, is there a bridge over the canal?
That's what we're looking at. What we were trying to do, and this was way back years ago, we were looking at, because of McDowell being such a busy street, because we've had, I think, 2 or 3 children hit there already, even with the traffic lights and everything going on, we wanted to flip the school. We wanted the front of the school to look north, come over to the canal. That would be a roadway coming in, plus the walk bridge would stay there. So we'd have traffic coming in and out, and then the kids would not be in harm's way with the busy traffic. That was one of the concepts here.
Okay.
So that's a street?
That would be a street coming straight off of Neighborhood Street right into our.
So that would be like 27th or 28th.
Yeah, that would be. And 28th, yeah, it might be 28th Street coming.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was a concept to keep our children safe.
Yeah.
Because I watch traffic and I've almost got hit there several times myself. So
Yeah.
It's not a fun place to go out.
Yeah, like that. And then the other question, this area just north of the gym, like when I walk on Creighton right now, it just feels like a lot of concrete. Would that be grass? Is that just a field, a courtyard?
This is just a thought, but right now it's grass.
Yeah.
Whatever we needed it to be, if we were to happen to choose that, then we'd go into the design phase and we'd make it what we want.
Okay. Just less concrete.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Less concrete. Yeah, I like the artificial turf we've been putting in. That's been working out really good. Here's Creighton schools without service buildings, and what that means is in the 20-year plan, the group that came together, the committee that formed, said that we want to give Creighton back all their land that was taken away. We want to move transportation, PPS, food service, and warehouse. That means we'd have to move all those, find a chunk of land or 2 pieces of land, put them out. And this is kind of a thought rendering of what the school would look like if it was all by itself. They would have plenty of places to play. Parking would be great. And safety, again, we would come from the north. We wouldn't be coming off McDowell, but you would still be able to use McDowell if we had to. That's just another creation. But as you saw there, it's costly. Larry T. Kennedy has an option 1, all in that orange strip there. That's where the 600 classrooms sit now. Those would go away, and we build a 2-story runway.
That's great.
Oh, there you go. This would be a 40 classroom, 2-story, it'd be a start of what we already have in design at Papago and Monte Vista. And then this would be, with a full rebuild, would be just like we did Papago, Monte Vista, move all the children, get everything out, put it down, and that's what Kennedy would look like.
Would DO North stay the same?
Excuse me?
Would DO North stay the same?
Yes, DO North would stay the same. Head Start, if you can see that little blue building right on a very far corner, Head Start would still be where Head Start is. So yeah, DO North would stay the same. Yeah, cafeteria, gym, and everything is being built in the corner. We also looked at encroaching into DO North to give more land. As you can see, we ended up with full baseball, full soccer, and that was our intent. Because a lot of our lands, they're integrated. You can't play soccer if you play baseball. If you can't play baseball if you play soccer. This way you can hold all the after-hour activities 2 or 3 at once. Biltmore Preparatory, this was an option that was on the table. Board members that were here prior had probably seen this before, but this would be to start giving them a new gym. One either like Monte Vista was a little smaller, Pasco, but give them a gym, and then behind it, the yellow strip would be your noisy building, which would be music, PE, and band. So that would be a start. And what it's showing there in pink, it's what's existing. We'd have to move the playground down and put that building there, but the old multi-purpose room and the 4 classrooms that are in the pink there, they'd be able to stay until the next phase. Mr. Mann?
So that was a lot of information really fast, and we didn't drill into, I know Melinda was on the list as a potential as well. We didn't drill into the specifics of that, but it worked very much like what we were looking at with Larry C. Kennedy. But you saw 2 different things there, so I want to take a moment to sort of differentiate between them. You saw phases, so you saw like for Creighton, a $9 million phase in the classroom building, and for LCK, a $4.5 million phase or $5.5 million phase to do a classroom building, and then you saw full site builds. So if we did the phase, that wouldn't be the whole story. It just kind of shows you what a phase 1 would look like. Obviously, what we have to phase out over time is a full site rebuild, but in those kind of pieces, parts, components. And the reason that we looked at that, in addition to full site rebuilds, is if you take a look at sort of those bond sales schedules, it was a way to try to make some adjustments in order to be able to impact multiple campuses earlier in the bond cycle. So really, that is probably the single most significant advantage to if we chose to do a phased approach, would be to be able to do those multiple projects. It could also help with targeting some specific needs here at Creighton. So as we look at something like that Biltmore Prep phase, or Biltmore Preparatory Academy phase, there's some tightness at that school, and that solves that tightness. So that would be, one of those potential abilities to target a specific need. And it also creates some shorter build times for the individual phases, but that's kind of a trick answer, if I could say that, because the phase may only take 6 to 8 months, but you're going to keep coming back to that school multiple times, which is why one of the challenges it creates is it creates multiple disruptions for that campus over time. Additionally, and you'll see the differential when we get to the next slide, build cost wise on 2016 dollars, you're looking at about $187 a square foot when you build by phases, because your cost models are different. You're not doing as large a project, you don't get as deep discounts, you're not buying in bulk. There's a lot of other factors in there. And then Mr. Sukanic pointed out very wisely, in addition to that, you're going back to the city for things like utilities, you're going to your utility companies, but you're going back to the city for permit costs multiple times. So there's some other smaller incremental costs that increase when you build things out in multiple phases. If we were to look at full rebuild as a model, the big advantage there is, you'll see there's a $37 per square foot cost differential. So you're looking at approximately $150 a square foot. You're only paying those utility costs and permit costs one time, which is an additional savings. you're disrupting each campus once. You're taking it, relocating students, leveling it, and putting up a beautiful campus and bringing the kids and the teachers back. And one of the things, and this was alluded to earlier, is with Monte Vista and Papago, with that sort of stark differentiation between, old school, new school, we've seen just a large number of students kind of flock back to those schools, and we've even seen some signs of home values increasing in those neighborhoods, which is, an additional consequence of doing those things. But that's also kind of an important piece as we talk about a lot of the other things we're looking at, that sort of that curb appeal for our schools and how do we make sure that our community continues to value those environments. They can really assist with that. The challenge is obviously it's a longer build time, it's 12 months, but you're only doing it once per site. You do, in many cases, have to relocate students during the build, but that's not true in all cases. It is potentially possible. I think we were talking earlier in the day about Creighton, because those classroom buildings from the 1930s are in the center and the first thing you have to deal with. There'd really be no way around relocating Creighton kids, whether it's a phase or a full site rebuild. But if you look at a school like Mary C. Kennedy, it might be possible to do a full site rebuild, but do it in a phased rollout so that we wouldn't necessarily have to disrupt all of the kids from the campus. And the biggest challenge that it creates is if you do a single campus per bond sale, if you look at those first 3 bond sales, you're talking a total of about $50 million. So if you were trying to do 3 $20 million campuses, $50 million isn't even going to get you there. So you'd be looking at, over those first 3 bond sales, only really being able to maybe accomplish 2 campuses through 2023, and then in 2023 you have that next bond sale to be able to move forward. So that becomes the only real significant downside or challenge to going to that full campus.
I'm a little bit confused. It's not that I disagree or agree or anything like that. The last time we visited this, you and Roy weren't involved. We had information. It was more information. But they dealt with the 1950s schools primarily, and they didn't even touch Creighton. Why are we going back to Creighton now? Is that going to be a priority? I'm just wondering. I realize it's 1935 buildings, and I couldn't understand when we had that information why we didn't touch Creighton.
Yeah, and can I share what I understand, and then correct me if I get it wrong? So I've been doing a lot of listening on these things and have had a lot of great information resources like Mr. Sukanik. The 20-year plan really designated that Creighton was the priority school. The problem with setting Creighton as the first school to do was that $45 million price tag attached to if we need to move the physical plant and transportation and all of those nutrition and all those other services that are there. And so that really was kind of the thing that prevented Creighton from moving forward as a project. When we started digging into it again, one of the things we started to talk about was, well, this really was the top priority. Are there some other models we can look at that will allow us to get to Creighton School? And that's also why those original Winslow site plans didn't include Creighton, because they said, well, $45 million. I think our last bond that we went out for, was right around there or less than that. That would have been all you could do off that bond. Right. We were able to build 2 schools and do a bunch of other maintenance and repair throughout the district and the building at Mac. So I think that's what's really held it up in the past. It's not that it hasn't been a priority. It is really a top priority. It's just getting past that $45 million price tag. And that's why what we're coming to you with is, let's look at 3 different models. Let's look at doing some things differently. The rotating of the school is brilliant. There's already some headway. We saw a presentation when we were out at, I think it was when we were at Excelencia for a board meeting a couple months back from the city of Phoenix and how they're working with SRP and federal grants, and they're already planning on putting a walking bridge across there. So can we get into partnership with them and do some things to bring a roadway across there as well? So that we're just trying to sort of shift the thinking and try to find ways to make that priority come back as possible.
Since I kind of travel those streets all the time, and we have McDowell and 28th and 27th. The only problem I can see with it is you'd be dead ending at the school. 27th here, we see people jumping the curb all the time, with the school, the ex-charter school there, and having problems with a dead end. That's the only problem I can see.
Good information, appreciate that. We'll definitely need to take that.
I was gonna say, I hear what you're saying here, but then if you look at Excellencia, we have that right there where the street goes right into that. And we will gate it off.
Okay.
Our school, so I took care of that.
Good thinking.
I remember, too, when, Alta Vista was rebuilt too, Mike Madison talked about, they looked into, what did you call it? As far as building a walkway or a bridge or whatever, so to make traffic, there's a name for it. Just said Sorry.
Blah, blah, blah.
Anyway, I know that the city, there's a name for it, but the city, the price was so expensive, it wasn't something that.
Adjacent ways.
Thank you, adjacent ways, yeah. So have you at all looked into, with the city of Phoenix, what that would cost, or is this is because it's so preliminary, we don't really know exactly how much it would cost us yet? Because I know Mike said that would have been, that there's just no way they could have done it, so they didn't.
Yeah, and this is, Roy's thumbs up with this is preliminary. We haven't gotten, deep in the weeds on details.
No, his thumbs up was because I remembered the word.
Oh, there you go. Is that what it was?
Yeah,
Oh,
basically.
sorry. I did not mean to steal the super.
Watch that today.
Thunder return.
Yes.
So, yeah, but I don't know that we really know a lot about what those cost models would look like. And really, we've had some sort of putting our heads together and thinking about what are the partnerships we can start tapping into to find ways to be able to sort of spread that burden. So, so if it is a direction that we choose to go as a district, we'd obviously be looking to, we jotted down the phone number of that gentleman who presented to us. So we'll definitely be looking to the city of Phoenix, SRP, who already has a strong partnership with SRP, and some of the other partners that might be able to come into play, and then obviously adjacent base funds and some of the other pieces. But it is possible that it won't be feasible. We're hopeful that it will be feasible, because it really would be the ideal phasing for that school, and would be a better model for bringing, particularly the walking students, which make up the majority of the students at their campus. It would be a much safer pathway for them to come to school.
Just like to say, Ms. Young, that man hit it on the head about Creighton. When we did that 2.5-year committee planning for 20-year, it was the belief of everybody in that room at the time that as we were to do Creighton, we wanted to give it all back to the kids and move all the services out of the way.
I remember that.
Big one, yeah.
And I also remember saying that it's not all 1930s buildings. There's some buildings on campus that predate the 1930s. That's what they said then.
Yeah, well, 1935 is all I can see there. That's about the oldest building there.
Part of it was when I
Yeah. That was the 800 building.
and it wasn't. You look really good.
Okay. I'll back that one up. Okay, now we will go to needed life cycle projects. And I, years ago, did several goals on life cycles, and everything has a life cycle. Like this carpeting is 10 years, air conditioning units are 12 to 15 years, the paint is anywhere from 7 to 10 years, but then you back up the life cycle of this carpet in a kinder is only 5 to 7 years because of the uses and the little feet running all over it. So in the life cycle process, the needed stuff that we were looking at is, of course, carpets. We got 6.5 sites. Every year when we had this bond from 2009 when we got it, we had a little bit of maintenance funding, and I always try to get the worst of the worst and start changing out from that point forward. Air conditioning units, you're looking at if we were to do 6 sites, and it's coming up right now. The units by SFB were all put on in 2002, 2003. So do the addition, and we're coming close to all of those being replaced. FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, all 9 sites need that. Our kids need chairs, our desks, our teachers need chairs and desks. It's just needed. One thing that we're working with now is above ground fuel tanks. I'd really like to get those above ground because right now I'm an A certified, we have a B certified and C certified, which means we're responsible for making sure these tanks don't leak, run properly, and everything is accounted for fuel-wise. Parking lots. We've done several parking lots, but I still have parking lots like Creighton, Loma Linda, Biltmore Prep, Mackin. They're just, we patch them, we seal them, and we get them to go as far as we can go, and then we have to start the process over. But the life cycle of the parking lot's 20 years old, and those things are about 30 years old right now. So I'm looking at stuff like that. Paint all 7 sites, of course. Everybody, all the principals and teachers could tell me, yeah, we need paint in classrooms, and we're trying to do that as we speak. And then paint 5 sites exterior. That's another life cycle that's 5 to 10 years. But out in Phoenix, you're lucky to get 5 to 7 years out of it. UVs just eat stuff up. When we had that community council, facilities feedback, yeah. The last community council we had. This is a lot of the stuff that came out of that with small life cycle projects. As you can see, fire alarms, security systems, hot water tanks, to keep hot water in our bathrooms, plumbing, they're old. Replace irrigation systems, replace security cameras, build adequate drainage for some classrooms because the way they were built, especially at Mackin, 48, 49, 50, 51. We have to get drained that because every time we get a heavy rain, we end up redoing all those classrooms.
I love trying swimming pool.
So yeah, I could build a retaining wall around them. There you go. And on that feedback, we had rubber surfaces. Well, that's very good. We're doing it in new schools, but it's very, very costly. Just to give you an example, like Creighton, to do the large playground that you have in back there, about $200,000. That's just a guess. But remodel bathrooms for your students and teachers. The door hardware that we have district-wide, we just try to keep it together. LED parking lot lighting. We're trying to do LEDs everywhere. What you're looking at here is LED lighting so we can save our utility money and put it back in the classroom for the kids. We got 3 or 4 schools now that have parking LED, wall pack LED, and we're saving a lot of money on that. Wrought iron perimeter and then perimeter fencing. We found through time that the chain link, they can come in whoever they are and they cut, and every day we're patching holes so our kids would be safe. We take down the wrought iron, the chain link fence, we put up the wrought iron, we haven't had any issues since then, so knock on wood. Replace water fountains. Our water fountains around all the schools, except for the newer ones, are starting to deteriorate. Mr. Mann.
So I'm going to kick this slide off with a mea culpa. The first bullet is redundant with bullet 4. Correctly put down there at the end of the day. So I apologize for that one being my twice. But really the big things that are coming up as we continue to move forward and bring information, obviously the board may request other components of information as well. But one thing that we need to vet out as community, if we choose to move forward in looking at a bond, one of the things that you always need to move bond projects forward is a PAC or a political action committee, because the district itself can't advocate for its own bond. So community interest in a PAC would be something that we need to have sorted out. If we were looking at a timetable based on the dates that we now have in this PAC, being June 11th is our last date to move forward with requesting an election from the county. So if we were to look at a November 8th election, this is kind of backwards engineering those dates out. We probably need to know about community interest in the impact by around April 19th. Mr. Sukanik and I are going to take a bunch of this projected data and do some additional vetting with other experts to get senses of where are we at project priority wise, where are we at as far as on target with some of our cost models and things with that, because we obviously worked with some experts already to get some estimates, but we want to really firm those numbers up more tightly. We're working to get a demographic study put together, and the reason for that is to have an understanding of what's happening over time, projected for our community, to know where are our students going to be coming from, where are they going to be living within our district, so that way we have a sense of where are our student populations likely to kind of grow fastest. So one of the things you saw in here, there's a couple of projects that were kind of kicked in for, well, what if we have a need? We'd like to know what the dollar amount is and how to fit it. So one of the ones that you saw that was maybe a bit of an oddball was Papago adding 4 more classrooms on the Papago school. And the reason that that was included there is we've seen a lot of growth in Papago since the school's been rebuilt. And I think that Mr. Geyer is still here. He would tell you he's got teachers and students like every place he can possibly put teachers and students. There's not another place to put teachers and students. But if we wanted to be able to continue to grow that school, we would need to add additional classrooms. And so that's why we looked at, well, we know the school is built to be able to have that add-on 4 rooms. What would that look like? But that's where the demographer comes in. Are we going to see continued growth in that community, or that sub-community of the greater Creighton neighborhood? And are we going to then have a need to be able to provide more classrooms at the school? That helps you make decisions about, well, what are your bond priorities based on regular needs. And then doing some triage with bonding capacity, voter threshold, and prioritization. Already mentioned prioritization a little bit, like what order do things need to happen in. But triaging bonding capacity is really just firming up with our partners, these dollar amounts that we're looking at, how accurate are they, what are these bond sales truly going to look like. One of the things that drives these bond sales is tax rate, and when this was presented, one of the things that we asked for from the partner was trying to keep the tax rate as level as possible. So if you look at the far column on the second page, you'll see a string of $3.65 numbers, and that was keeping that tax rate level over time. But we have other options that we could look into in working with the tax rate. We could make the tax rate lower, we could make the tax rate higher. And so we need to make decisions about what's the appropriate thing to do and what impact does that have on the bond sales and what impact does that have on the funding to move the prioritized projects forward. And then lastly, within that piece is that voter threshold. So this model that you're given is based on just pull the number out of the air, $85 million. If you were to build an $85 million bond, this is one potential way that bond could look. That 85 million wasn't based on any of these needs that you saw. That was just a number that the capital group worked with. So as we look at these numbers, it's not just about what our needs are, it's about what are the voters willing to actually pass. So, are they willing to pass an $85 million bond? That gets you more of these projects done in a 10-year cycle. But if the threshold is really only $65 million, that changes your prioritization of what you can do based on the number of dollars that are available. And it's interesting, I've been through that process once before, actually shortly before coming here when I was at Madison. It blew our minds. We were scared to death, but we actually went out for a $95 million 10-year bond. And we thought, there's no way, there's no way. And I think it's a completely different, set of circumstances, but honestly, the largest bond we had gone out to prior to that was less than half that dollar. I think our prior bond was probably around $35 million or something like that. So the question that you start to ask yourself is, we had a $35 million 5-year bond. How do you tell people, well, for 10 years we need 95? See, 35 million times 2 equals 95. I can't make that math work. And we're very shocked to have that passed by a very broad margin. It was like I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was like around 60-something%. So it was actually a pretty healthy passage. And it shocked us that our community was willing to go for a $95 million bond. So we don't want to short sell ourselves and not be able to get projects done. So we really need to get a sense of what is willing to fund for us.
How do you do that?
There's probably a number of things that we have to do. One of them would obviously be to do some surveying. And that's kind of where that PAC piece comes into play, because rules have changed for what the district and the board may and may not do. So 2 bonds ago that I was involved in, the board was actually able to call for a group to go out and kind of test the community and find out, okay, you know, if we brought you a...
So we've done that in Creighton too.
Yeah, exactly.
In 2009.
2009, right. So, but now with the new rules, the board and the district can't do that, but a political action committee, a PAC, could go out and do that. So with my last bond experience with Madison, that was the way that was handled, was the PAC actually went out and had a group. And part of their activity was they did telephone survey, and they asked high efficacy voters, if we floated this to you, how would you react to it? Would you vote yes or no? If we floated this to you, how would you react to it, yes or no? So I think that would be an important component of really knowing, you know, is this viable for a threshold for that dollar? And then obviously, there's no date set for this, but it would need to be in advance of that June 11th deadline if we wanted to go for November, with that November 8th election. The board would need to vote on determining an election. And either, you know, that could be for November 8th of this year, or it could be for the subsequent year. We're just bringing the information forward so that the board has all the information on what that program is.
And another question about prioritization. I assume that we would want to get that an updated feel from our community on what the prioritization would be. Yeah.
And that can actually be, that's another thing that can be helped by that sort of survey data, is you can float potential projects. What do you think about Creighton School for What do you think about this as a project? You can actually get a feel for the community and what their desires are.
We can, yeah, and this is where I think like some of the polling in education in Arizona breaks down is like what, not just which ones do you think are a priority, but like which ones are you willing to pay for?
Right.
And I don't know how to do that. But I'll let you figure it out.
I can't do that. You guys can't do that. But the PAC and the group that they work with, it's really largely a function of how they structure those questions and
Yeah.
who they
just hire, yeah, the PAC, I'm not leading the PAC, but the PAC could hire a political firm. They do this all the time. They just need money.
So if the board members know of anybody who would be of a community leader interest in seeking the board's direction on seeking an election, it might behoove the board to have a conversation with a potential political action committee leader in terms of the support or steps that a political action committee leader would take to pursue community input and thresholds. I think you addressed the question. Did you want to go deeper on?
No, I think all my questions are answered.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and so we left the place here for discussion, and I think really the discussion here is sort of an opportunity for the board to talk about, you know, where you're at with this information and what types of things might you be considering moving forward, pros and cons, and different timetables for moving forward. And obviously we're here as information.
Oh, and the cost to actually put it on the ballot. Do we know what 30,000?
Yeah, well, I probably should have double checked the exact dollar amount. What I have is a ballpark number that we typically use is $30,000
to run an election.
Well, if we're already running an election for school board, for governing board members, if we have more than 3 candidates, do we have to pay for both of these, or we're already running an election?
They're separate.
I understand they're separate.
They actually go out as separate pamphlets, and a lot of that cost is related to the development and production of the pamphlets that get distributed.
And it is in the budget should the board choose to elect to go in this direction. For both.
You know, I don't know if I have anything new. I think having community, I just want to emphasize, I think our kids deserve this. I think the schools need an uplift. I don't know what to call it, an upgrade. I know that when parents are looking for schools, of course they want a loving teacher first and foremost, but like they don't even open the door if the school's ugly. Like they just don't. I have these conversations every week with parents. To me, like I don't know. I mean, I'm personally ready to knock on doors and make this happen, but I'm just one person. But like having a pack behind this and driving it and being a leader and targeting and doing all that other legwork, the strategic planning, that to me is like, I don't want to put it up for an election. 30,000 is less important to me. I don't want to go out and lose. I want Creighton to be on the losing column. So that's something that is interesting to me. Win or, and I know in the past I said, well, what about 1, 2, 3? I think win or lose, like 1, 2, 3 is non-factor for me, where I stand for this.
When I was around when they had the 20-year projected plan and all that, and I couldn't understand, I could not comprehend why we were building new schools, why we wanted to build new schools. And Suzanne was on the board at that time and explained to me, because they were only 50 years old. I mean, this past year, they finally raised the elementary school I went to and my dad, who's 89, went to. They finally got rid of it, but they build them different in the East Coast. And Suzanne explained to me the life expectancy of our schools that were built is 50 years. We have gone on beyond the life expectancy of those schools. You know, the physical plant and Roy have kept them up, and they look, you know, they don't look run down and really beaten, but they're not, they've gone beyond what they were expected to last. And so that makes a big difference, you know, and also, you know, it does make a difference, like Carl says, when a prospective parent has their little darling in their hand and goes up to the school and there's one looks a lot nicer, you know, first impressions do make a difference. They might come later, but the first impression is what makes a difference.
The physical wear and tear is a real science relative to safety, and you know, certainly the facilities can continue to educate children because it is about the relationship with the teacher. What we're also learning is that in some of the architectural designs now, especially with more digital learning and more collaborative learning, and some of the things we talked about in the strategic plan about the type of environments we want for learning, the buildings were built for a more institutional, kind of industrial model of learning, and very popular for their 40 years. And so the designs that are now being created are more around small group project learning, independent opportunities, whole group opportunities, large group opportunities, more flexible learning spaces. And as we compete for 21st century learners, the buildings might benefit from reflecting that should the board choose to go in that direction.
I could add too, you know, one piece I don't think that we've talked about that's really important that I can't believe this slipped my mind. It really is another key piece because bringing up, you know, well, these buildings, you know, why would you need to tear them down and rebuild them? I got to be part of a community discussion about a year ago about, well, why would you tear down and rebuild? My house is, you know, the same age as the school. Well, there's a significant difference when you're dealing with kind of a public building, because some of the infrastructure that's in these public buildings is on a much more massive scale. So when you have, like when I have, you know, a pipe issue in my home, I might have to open up a wall or, you know, have my floor saw cut. It's a pretty minor deal because the house is only a certain size. But when you start to have infrastructure that's kind of in the foundations begin to fail out in a large sort of public building, those costs are massive. Sometimes the amount of money that you start investing into that maintenance, when you look at it over time, it's ridiculous compared to rebuilding. But the other piece is, Mr. Sakanik was sharing about the use of LED and all that. When you do a new building, you get the opportunity to refresh all of those fixtures, all of the electrical appliances, everything that you do with water in the facilities, heating and cooling. And so what you ultimately do is you build a facility that's far more energy and water efficient, and you cut your cost to operate that building. You also put in different types of surfaces that are less expensive to maintain. And so when you do that, what you do is you reduce your maintenance and operations budget costs over time, and as you so astutely pointed out earlier, what that lets you do is take that money and keep it in the classroom instead of sending it off to the utility. So that's another kind of important consideration as we talk about why we want to be replacing this juncture.
I just add one thing to that. One more thing to that is a lot of people don't realize in your home, you have 5 or 6 or 4 or 3 people all the time in that home. In our classroom, we run 30 children. The whole school we have running down the hallway, you have 900 to 1,000 kids every day. The wear and tear is just astronomical.
Just add one more comment in the spirit of President Castine's comments at the beginning of the meeting, that if we do this, I know we're already going to have a number of critics, and I hope that if we do this, that we are united in support, or else we don't do it, because it's going to be hard enough, I think, raising people's taxes in Arizona. I just want us to think about that when we're trying to, I would hope we go for a consensus vote on that.
Thank you.
To legislative and political report.
Yep. Madam President, colleagues, just a few updates. First and foremost, I mentioned this at the top of the meeting, but the action that we took on a number of legislative issues, I think was well received by our peer board members, and we were definitely heard. So if you didn't already notice in your board packets, I don't know, they're not your packets, the folders we get from Hilda, there is a letter in response to our letter from the superintendent of public instruction herself, and not making excuses or blaming vendors as we've seen between various elected officials downtown. I think we got a very fair response, like the implementation for current year funding will be a transition, it'll be rough. I thought that was awesome to get a response, and I think the superintendent can tell us more like why this is a big deal.
And even in my time in the Arizona Department of Education, that kind of letter was never directed or personalized or customized. And while they're trying very hard to communicate effectively on how they're going to phase in and respond to cash flow needs of districts as they go through this, they were acknowledging Creighton's standing. And I've just never seen a letter like this, and I'm very pleased that she wrote it and that there is a message of continuity and phasing.
Yeah. So thanks for standing and leading on this issue. It means a lot. The other item I needed to direct your attention to, I know I get to be the bearer of bad news as the legislative liaison, but we just took action in our opposition to voucher expansion. The governor has publicly said he's trying to stave that off because we have Prop 123, but I don't think everyone's on that same page. Tomorrow, if you're not familiar with Strike All or strikers, the House Appropriations Committee has struck the language from a pre-existing bill, reinserted voucher expansion. It wouldn't be for 100% of families in Arizona, it'd be 80% of families in Arizona would be eligible. To me, I mean, the notes from ASBA kind of stated all that this is like, it's an interesting conversation to talk about taking money out of public education when we're going to an election to take money from the land trust to fill into public education. I know it's not in alignment with the things that we as a board care about. We don't have time to take action, so not as a board, but individually, I don't ask of you all to do very much, but I will ask if you wouldn't mind making 2 phone calls in the morning. Both representatives Alston and Meyer, who represent Creighton District, sit on the House Appropriations Committee. I know they'll already be opposed, but I think it's important to let them know that we have their back. And it's not just enough to vote no, like they need to bring it. So if you need their phone numbers, I'm happy to give them to you. But that's Representative Alston from LD 24 and Representative Meyer from LD 28. Sorry, 28. That concludes my report.
And just to put it in perspective, that means that any family of four making less than $82,000 a year would be eligible for a voucher and could funnel funding away from our traditional public schools.
And I mean, to just top it off, right? It's, for me personally, it's not necessarily that I'm opposed to vouchers. I don't know that I would use them for my own family. But we already know that the, like with the reports from the Arizona Republic, the families who are using them are not actually the families with the students with the greatest needs. They are actually the families that live in areas where they have A-rated schools by the state's measurements as the highest quality school, which I personally would check those labels. But those are the families who are taking advantage of this. So it actually doesn't serve our community. It hasn't served our community. Be interested to see how that could, but it doesn't. So it's not for our community, and we need to do what we can to stop it.
Okay, so that brings us to 11A, future agenda items. And I'll take a golden sheet. I'm going to go ahead and put in a future agenda item for a vote on the bond as we move forward. I'm not sure. It looks like the date for that would be either in April or May. So I don't know how specific I need to be with what I say on there, but I'd like to.
You want an action item for deciding whether the board should go for a bond election.
Yeah, but I don't need to get specific with numbers or anything like that.
Not on this.
Okay.
We should come to you with recommendations.
Okay.
Madam President, I'd like to add one item. Timeline, we'll let you and the superintendent decide, but I'd like to learn more about our procurement process as we try to build a comprehensive community. I hope that the folks that we're doing business with, it's not just transactional. We clearly want to get a good deal, but would love to figure out if we can add community elements to the procurement process. So I'd like to figure out what we have already.
Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else have any other future agenda items? Okay, so that brings us to 12.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.